There's never a neutral impact that trauma has on a relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. Let's talk generational trauma. This is one of my favorite topics to discuss because experiencing trauma doesn't happen in a vacuum. And sometimes we don't realize how deeply rooted trauma is in our families and how that affects us as a whole. Assalamu alaikum, everyone, and welcome back to the channel. If you are new here, my name is Hannah. I am a PA who practices medicine. I am a trauma coach, and I also am a high impact self-improvement coach. This is my channel. It is all about self-improvement, my self-improvement journey, and helping you along your self-improvement journey. When I'm working with my trauma group coaching clients or tackling some form of trauma with my one-on-one coaching clients, the topic of generational trauma gets brought up a lot. Something that we don't really often talk about from the Islamic perspective. And I actually put out 2 shorts recently on generational trauma, and the response to that was really interesting because a lot of people had never looked at the Quran in that way. Let's talk about it. What is generational trauma? Generational trauma is trauma that is transmitted through one generation to another. Essentially, the beliefs, the habits, the practices that one generation, great-great-grandparents, has are used and implemented in the raising of the generations ahead. And so the final generation, or the generation that is alive at that time, is finding themselves being harmed by the very same traumatic methods that were used on their parents or their grandparents or their great-grandparents. And nobody stops and questions it. Nobody says, hey, why are we carrying on these practices, even though they're causing harm and not bringing benefit? And there are 2 ways that I see from the Quran that we can kind of think about this. First of all, is just the idea of passing generational ideas that are harmful along. How often in the Quran do we hear the prophets of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala telling their people to worship Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala alone and to leave their polytheistic beliefs or their worshiping of partners associated with Allah? And how often do we hear the response from those people that where they say something along the lines of, are you asking us to leave that which our forefathers did? Meaning, we're not going to think about this. We're not going to think about how silly it is to worship more than one God or associate partners with the ultimate God. We're not going to think about how this is affecting our akhirah. In fact, we are going to deny that there's even a resurrection that happens and continue this generational idea, even if it is ultimately damaging to our dunya and our akhirah. It's one way to look at the way just generational ideas can impact people. Assalamu alaikum, everyone. This is Editing Hannah here, and I thought it might be good to clear something up really quickly. So when I'm talking about this idea that there were people from nations that had prophets that use the excuse, hey, my forefathers were worshiping this way, why would I change it? I'm not calling that generational trauma. That's not generational trauma. Rather, what I'm trying to highlight is the fact that it is so common and easy for people to continue to use this excuse of, well, this is how it's always been, even if it means that they're perpetuating harmful actions, harmful principles, harmful beliefs, and that the same line of thinking is used in generational trauma. How many generations have to continue to accept this as a way of living just because it's the way that they were raised before someone says, hey, this is actually harmful. This is actually not leading to the kinds of results that we want. Let's take a step back and actually think about what we're doing and what impact it's having. And if people are willing to do that, it'll make a whole lot of difference. But the reality of it is that a lot of people are just willing to accept things as they are because that's always how they have been. I mean, when you think about it, these individuals had literal prophet in their presence. They had, we're talking Prophet Musa alayhi salam, Prophet, Shu'aib, Prophet Nuh. All of these prophets are telling their people, stop doing worshiping in the way that you're worshiping. You are going to lose your akhirah. And they didn't give reasons of, well, here's my issues with the belief system. You're bringing, hey, I have questions about what Tawheed means. They're literally just saying, well, this is how we've always done it. Why would we change it? Hope that clears things up. All right, back to the video. And then generational trauma is interesting because there is actually an example of generational trauma in the Quran. Many of us don't think about it. And that is the example of Ibrahim alayhi salam. You hear the story of Ibrahim alayhi salam and his interaction with his father. Not only was his father the one who created the idols that led his people to worship and ultimately led to their damned eternity, But Ibrahim alayhi salam's father was extremely, extremely abusive. If you hear the language of how he speaks to Ibrahim, and Ibrahim was clearly an obedient son, he was clearly a good-hearted. I mean, he's a prophet of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala that received one of the most blessed titles from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And yet his father threatened to kill him. And his father also allowed for his own son to be tied up and launched into a pit of fire by his people. Now that generational trauma could have impacted Ibrahim alayhi salam. Yes, he was a prophet, but he was a human being as well. And like many others that we see in our lives, he could have taken that very same level of hostility and vitriol and anger and applied it to his children. But if you look in other parts of the Quran, you see how Ibrahim alayhi salam actually speaks and treats his children, the way he speaks to Ismail alayhi salam, the joy he feels when he's giving his children, the pain he feels when he is of having to leave his son in a desert. So much respect and care and gentleness comes from Ibrahim alayhi salam. And it's clear, it's so clear that he did not continue that generational trauma. In fact, the trauma ended with him. And I give this example because I really want us to reflect more deeply when it comes to trauma from an Islamic perspective, seeing trauma through an Islamic lens, because trauma is real. The impact it has on our brain is real. The impact that it has on our overall bodies is real. So many people are struggling with trauma. And I truly believe, and I say this to my trauma group coaching clients, that there is never a time where your relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, if you had trauma, is not going to be impacted. Either you are going to find that through your trauma, you find a way to connect more with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, or in response to your trauma, you distance yourself from Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. There's never a neutral impact that trauma has on our relationship with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because trauma affects the nervous system, and one of the things that the nervous system does is help us connect with meaningful relationships. We have to be able to look at trauma not just through the lens of science, but through the lens of our deen. And we can take lessons from this, that even when we have experienced trauma, first of all, there are ways to heal trauma. And that's literally what I help people do as a trauma coach. But even beyond that, when we take time to heal our trauma, when we take time to do the things to help regulate our nervous system, to help shift our mindset, to help put into practice the very exact things that are going to ensure that we don't re-traumatize ourselves in the future, we are building a whole new life for our future generations, for our children, because we decide it ends with us. Yes, some people might decide that they are just going to be filled with rage and anger, and they are going to take it out on the innocent because they have no other way of dealing with their trauma. We decide we are going to do the hard work. We are going to do the vulnerable work. We're going to ask the tough questions. We are going to use the healing tactics. We are going to root in our deen. And we are going to find alternative, healthy, safe ways to raise our children so they don't have to deal with what we had to deal with. And may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala reward every single one of you guys who is ready to say, I am going to be the one who ends generational trauma in my family. If you are there, if that is where you're at, even if you don't know how to get there, even if you don't know what to do, that's okay. You make the intention, Allah will open the doors for you. But I want you to comment below. If you're ready to end generational trauma in your family, comment below. I want people to see that they're not alone. If you're watching this, obviously this resonates with you. I want people to see they're not alone. Comment below, I'm ending generational trauma in my family, inshallah. Or it ends with me, inshallah. And of course, if you are ready to invest in your healing journey, you are ready to invest in your self-improvement journey, you're ready to do what it takes, you want to work with me. If you're a Muslim woman who wants to join the trauma group coaching program, meaning if your main issue is trauma, the waiting list is open. And inshallah, the actual cohort is going to be open very, very soon. Link is in the description. And if you want to work with me one-on-one on any specific issue, whether it's related to trauma or not, the application to apply for one-on-one coaching is available on my website, link in the description as well. And I will see you guys next time. Assalamu alaikum.